4 mountain men ordered mail-order bride, but when the stagecoach door swung open, the women who arrived were sisters seeking for love. Dust swirls across a lonely depot. 4 rugged men, scarred by the mountains, stand waiting for wives they've never met. But instead of 4 strangers, 4 sisters step down, clinging to one another, refusing to be parted. At first, there's shock, even anger. A contract broken, a future uncertain. Yet mercy pulls them under one roof, where laughter, hunger, and faith begin to bind hearts together. But the valley hides danger. A banker's shadow stretches long, and a hidden document whispers of water rights that could change everything. Love might save them, or paint a target on their backs. The barn fire crackles in the night, rifles gleam in calloused hands, and a choice must be made: vengeance or mercy. Will these mountain men and sisters build a family stronger than greed? Or will the land itself be torn apart before love can take root? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weathered boards of the depot platform as 4 men shifted nervously from boot to boot. Jonas Harper stood tall and broad-shouldered, his clean black coat a stark contrast to his usual ranch wear. Next to him, Caleb Turner fiddled with a slightly crushed bunch of wildflowers, his round face betraying both hope and anxiety. Micah Gray had polished his boots till they gleamed, though his calloused blacksmith's hands couldn't quite get clean. Elias Boone lingered at the edge of the group, a carved wooden pendant swinging from his fingers, a peace offering he wasn't sure he'd have the courage to present. "Reckon we're all fools," Caleb broke the silence with a weak chuckle. 4 grown men jumping at marriage, advertisements like yearlings at fresh hay. "Speak for yourself," Micah responded, though his attempt at dignity was undermined by how often he checked his pocket watch. "Some of us gave this careful consideration." Jonas said nothing, his eyes fixed on the distant bend in the road where the stage would appear. The years of solitude in his valley cabin weighed heavy on his shoulders. Elias merely nodded, his tracker's instincts making him aware of how they all masked their hope with gruff humor. The sound of wheels and hoofbeats brought them all to attention. The stagecoach appeared through the dust, swaying as it navigated the rutted road. The driver called out to his team and the coach creaked to a stop before the platform. "Here we go, boys," Caleb muttered, straightening his vest. The door swung open, and the men collectively held their breath. A young woman emerged first, her movements careful but determined. She wore a simple blue dress, dusty from travel, but carried herself with quiet dignity. This was Anna Whitlock, though the men didn't know her name yet. She turned immediately to assist another woman down, one with gentle eyes and a small leather satchel that clinked with glass bottles. Sarah. The third sister practically bounded out, her eyes bright despite the long journey. Leah's quick glance took in all 4 men and a hint of mischief played at her lips. But it was the last sister who changed everything. Ruth emerged slowly, her face pale beneath her bonnet. She'd barely set foot on the platform when her knees buckled. Jonas moved without thinking, crossing the space in 2 long strides to catch her before she fell. She was light in his arms, too light, and he could feel her trembling. "Ruth!" Anna was there instantly, her hand on her sister's forehead. "When did you last eat?" "I'm fine," Ruth protested weakly. "Just tired from the journey." The men exchanged glances, confusion evident on their faces. These women clearly knew each other, were familiar with each other's needs and habits. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Each had expected their own bride, chosen through careful correspondence, not this complicated tangle of sisters and obligations. "There's a cafe just there," Caleb spoke up, his cook's instincts taking. Over good soup and fresh bread, better than trail dust at any rate. Sarah was already pulling a small bottle from her satchel. "A few drops of this first, Ruth. It'll help with the dizziness." Jonas found himself supporting Ruth's weight as they made their way to the cafe, while Elias and Micah gathered the women's bags. The small dining room was empty save for their group, the late afternoon lull working in their favor. They arranged themselves around two pushed-together tables, an awkward gathering of strangers bound by letters and desperation. "I believe," Anna said once cups of coffee had been distributed, "we owe you an explanation." Her spine was straight, her voice steady, though her fingers worried the edge of her cup. "We answered your advertisements together deliberately." Together. Micah's brow furrowed. "But the letters were written by each of us, yes," Leah cut in, her natural enthusiasm bubbling through. "But we made a promise. We wouldn't be separated, not after everything." The story emerged piece by piece, their parents' death, the struggle to keep their Missouri farm, the mounting debts that finally forced them to seek marriages out west. But through it all, they'd remained unified, supporting each other, protecting each other. "The marriage broker wasn't pleased," Sarah said softly. "He wanted to send us to different territories. Said we'd fetch better prices apart." Her gentle voice carried an edge of steel at the memory. "Prices?" Jonas's quiet word held thunder. His words, not ours. Anna met his gaze steadily. "We refused. Said we'd find our own way if he wouldn't help us stay together. That's when we saw your advertisements. All from the same valley. It seemed like Providence." Caleb set his coffee down with a thunk. "So you each chose one of us, knowing you'd all end up here?" "We prayed about it." Ruth spoke up from where she sat, some color returning to her cheeks after the soup. "Matched ourselves to your letters as best we could, hoping you'd understand once we explained." The men sat with this revelation, their careful plans, their individual hopes, all tangled now in this web of sisterly devotion. Yet none could deny the fierce admiration that rose, watching how these women protected each other. "It's not what we expected," Elias said finally, his quiet voice thoughtful. "But maybe it's better." "Better?" Micah asked. "4 women? Alone in the territories? They're stronger together. Smarter, too, if you ask me." Elias's words carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many broken by frontier isolation. Jonas studied Anna's face, saw the worry she tried to hide, the responsibility she carried. "You're asking us to understand, to accept this arrangement as it is." "We're asking for a chance," Anna replied, "to prove we can be good wives, build good homes. But yes, we're asking to stay together, to be family." The word family hung in the air. These men had lived solitary lives carrying their own wounds and loneliness. The idea of not just a wife, but a larger circle of care and connection, it stirred something deep and hungry in their hearts. Caleb was the first to smile, his natural warmth breaking through. "Well, I reckon my cabin could use curtains, and maybe a garden, and it ain't so far from Jonas's place. Visiting would be easy enough." "My forge is just over the ridge," Micah added slowly. "Close enough to hear if anyone needs help." "The valley's protected," Elias said. "Good hunting. Good water. Room enough for all." They looked to Jonas, who'd been their unofficial leader in many ways. He was still supporting Ruth, his strong arm gentle around her shoulders. Something in him had shifted, watching these sisters fight for each other. "We'll need to build proper houses," he said finally. "The cabins we have, they're rough. Not fit for ladies." "We're stronger than we look," Leah grinned, "and I'm fair hand with a hammer." "And I can tend to any injuries that come from learning," Sarah added with a small smile. The tension around the table eased, replaced by cautious hope. It wasn't what any of them had planned, but perhaps it was what they all needed. The sisters exchanged glances of relief, while the men began to see possibilities they hadn't considered before. "There's much to discuss," Anna said. "Arrangements to make. But first," she looked at her youngest sister with concern. "First, we get Ruth somewhere she can properly rest. Jonas finished. My place is closest. We can sort out the details tomorrow. As they gathered themselves to leave the cafe, the late sun painted the valley in gold. 4 sisters, 4 mountain men, all of them stepping into something new and unexpected. But there was promise in the air, thick as the mountain wildflowers that bloomed despite the harsh climate. Promise of family, of healing, of homes built on understanding and care rather than mere convenience. The stagecoach driver, watching from his perch, shook his head with a knowing smile. He'd seen many mail-order arrangements in his years on this route, but something told him this one, complicated as it was, might just work out better than most. The cafe's back room offered a welcome refuge from curious eyes. Lamplight danced across the worn wooden tables, casting warm shadows on the whitewashed walls. Steam rose from bowls of thick beef stew, the hearty aroma mixing with fresh-baked bread. The sisters ate with careful manners that spoke of good upbringing, though their pace betrayed real hunger. Ruth's hands trembled less as she spooned up the rich broth. Sarah broke her bread into precise pieces, while Leah tried not to show how quickly she wanted to empty her bowl. Anna watched them all, taking smaller bites herself, as if ensuring her sisters ate their fill first. Jonas observed this quiet dance of sisterly care, his own stew cooling before him. The other men noticed too. Caleb's usual jovial expression softened, while Elias's stern features eased slightly. Even Micah set aside his initial skepticism as he watched Leah discreetly pass her butter to Ruth. This isn't what was agreed upon, Jonas finally said, his deep voice careful but firm. The advertisements were clear. Individual matches, not... He gestured at their gathered group. Not this arrangement. Seems to me... There's been some manner of deception, Elias added, his quiet words carrying an edge. That broker in Denver had no right to take fees if he knew this wasn't proper. Anna set down her spoon, her spine straightening. We told no lies in our letters. Each sister wrote her own words, shared her own heart. The only thing we held back was our connection to each other. Her clear gaze met Jonas's. As for the broker's fees, we paid every cent we had. All we have left is our word, and our prayers. And each other, Sarah added softly, her hand finding Ruth's under the table. Leah leaned forward, her natural animation breaking through her fatigue. We lost our parents 2 winters ago. Fever took them both within a week of each other. We managed the farm as best we could, but... She swallowed hard. But the debts mounted, Anna finished. The bank wouldn't extend our credit further. We sold what we could, but it wasn't enough. When we saw your advertisements all from the same valley, she spread her hands. It seemed like an answer to prayer. We couldn't bear to be separated. Ruth's voice was barely above a whisper. Not after everything, we're all we have left. The men exchanged glances. The sisters' story struck chords they understood too well. Loss, hardship, the struggle to keep going when the world seemed set against you. Still, this wasn't the simple arrangement they'd planned for. Night's coming on, Caleb said after a long moment, his practical nature asserting itself. And that sky's threatening rain. My cabin's closest to town. Got enough room for the ladies to sleep comfortable while we sort things out proper. Separate rooms? Jonas asked pointedly. Got my main room and a storage room. Clean enough. Just needs bedding brought in. I'll bed down in the barn. Caleb's tone brooked no argument. Can't leave them at the depot, and the town's got no proper boarding house. Thunder rumbled in the distance as they loaded the sisters' trunks into wagons. Anna supervised carefully, making sure Ruth's medicines and Sarah's herb packets were secured against the weather. The first fat drops of rain began to fall as they finished, forcing them all under the depot's wide overhang. Leah stumbled slightly on the wet boards, the strap of her shoe giving way with a snap. Before she could bend to fix it, Elias was there, pulling leather twine from his pocket. His rough hands worked quickly, weaving a temporary repair stronger than the original. Much obliged, Leah said, testing the strap with careful steps. That's real fine work. Elias nodded. something softening in his expression. Learned it from Cherokee neighbors back in Arkansas. Proper way to fix leather so it holds. The rain fell steadier now, drumming on the depot roof. The sisters huddled together, their traveling dresses damp at the hems. Despite their evident exhaustion, they maintained their dignity, sharing quiet words and subtle touches of reassurance. "We should get moving before it really opens up," Caleb said, eyeing the darkening sky. "Jonas, your wagon's got the better cover. Might be best for the ladies to ride with you. Elias and I can handle their trunks in mine." They made the arrangements quickly, helping the sisters up into Jonas's wagon. Ruth needed extra assistance, but she managed with Anna's steady hand and Jonas's careful support. The other men secured the luggage, tying tarp over the trunks to keep out the rain. "We'll follow right behind," Caleb assured them, checking the knots one final time. "Roads clear enough, even in the dark." The sisters settled into Jonas's wagon, huddled together under the canvas cover. Their faces showed a mixture of uncertainty and resolve. Whatever tomorrow might bring, they would face it together. The men stood in the rain, watching as the wagons pulled away from the depot. "Never thought my first night with a mail-order bride would involve 3 extras," Micah muttered, but there was more humor than bitterness in his tone. "Ain't exactly what any of us planned," Caleb agreed, water dripping from his hat brim. "But seems to me those girls have had enough hardship without us adding to it." Elias said nothing, but his expression was thoughtful as he mounted up to follow the wagons. The rain fell steadily now, washing the dust from the air and turning the road darker. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight, necessity and compassion had made the decision for them. The small procession moved carefully through the gathering dusk, wagon wheels cutting dark tracks in the muddy road. In the lead wagon, the sisters drew together for warmth, while Jonas guided his team with steady hands. Behind them, the men rode in contemplative silence, each lost in thoughts of how their carefully laid plans had been upended by 4 determined sisters. The last light faded from the sky as they reached Caleb's cabin. Working quickly in the rain, they helped the sisters down and carried their essential bags inside. The main room was plain but clean, with a stone fireplace and solid furniture. The storage room, as Caleb had promised, was neat enough once fresh bedding was brought in. "It's not much," Caleb said apologetically, building up the fire. "But it'll keep you warm and dry for the night." "It's more than enough," Anna assured him, helping Ruth settle into a chair near the hearth. "We're grateful for your kindness." The men stepped outside, leaving the sisters to arrange themselves for the night. They stood under the dripping eaves, water running off their hats and coats, each lost in their own thoughts about what tomorrow might bring. None of them had expected this twist in their carefully laid plans. Yet watching those 4 sisters supporting each other with quiet strength and dignity had stirred something in each man's heart. Tomorrow would bring decisions and discussions, but for tonight, they had done what the decent men must: offered shelter and safety to those in need. The rain continued to fall, its steady rhythm broken only by the occasional rumble of thunder. Inside the cabin, lamplight glowed warm through the windows, and the sisters' soft voices could barely be heard as they prepared for sleep. Outside, the men made their own preparations, Caleb to his barn, the others to their horses for the ride home, each carrying with them the weight of an unexpected responsibility in the first stirrings, of something that felt remarkably like hope. Morning came slowly to the valley, the sun struggling to pierce heavy clouds that clung to the mountain peaks. The rain had passed, leaving behind a world of glistening leaves and muddy tracks. At Caleb's cabin, wood smoke curled from the chimney as the sisters prepared a simple breakfast from his stores. Jonas arrived first, his wagon creaking through the mud. Elias and Micah followed shortly after, their horses' hooves squelching in the wet earth. They found Caleb already hitching his team, his usual cheerful manner somewhat subdued in the gray morning light. "Reckon we ought to show them the lay of the land," Jonas said quietly as they gathered near the wagons. "Let them see what they're getting into." The sisters emerged from the cabin, their traveling dresses somewhat crumpled, but their faces freshly washed. Ruth moved carefully, still pale from yesterday's exhaustion, but she managed a small smile as Anna helped her into Jonas's wagon. "The valley opens up nice once we get past these woods," Caleb explained as they started down the rutted trail. He pointed out landmarks as they went, a lightning-struck oak that marked the path to town, a creek crossing where deer often gathered at dawn. The wagon wheels cut fresh tracks in the mud as they followed the winding trail. Sarah noticed wild herbs growing along the way, naming them softly to her sisters: yarrow for fever, elderberry for winter colds. Elias caught her words and glanced back with newfound interest. At a fork in the trail, the men drew their wagons to a halt. The valley spread before them, each homestead visible from this vantage point. Jonas gestured to the higher ground, where a solid cabin stood against the mountain backdrop. "That's my place up there," he said. "Good view of the whole valley. Catches the morning sun." "Mine's down by the creek," Caleb added, pointing to a smaller cabin with a neat vegetable patch. "Not as grand, but the soil's rich for growing." Micah's homestead lay near a broad meadow, his cabin larger than the others, with a workshop attached where his forge stood quiet. "Built it bigger than I needed," he admitted. "Thought I might expand someday." Elias simply nodded toward the tree line where his cabin nestled among the pines. "Got good hunting up that way," was all he said. The men exchanged uncertain glances. The question of where the sisters would stay hung unspoken in the damp air. "We should discuss arrangements," Jonas began carefully. "We're staying together," Anna said firmly, her hand finding Ruth's. "That's not up for debate." The men shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how they'd planned things. 4 separate brides for 4 separate cabins. That had been the understanding. "My loft's empty," Micah offered after a moment. "Plenty of room up there, if the ladies don't mind rough quarters for now." Relief and worry warred on the men's faces. It wasn't proper, exactly, but neither was sending the sisters to separate cabins when they'd made their wishes so clear. They continued to Micah's homestead, the wagons grinding through mud until they reached his cabin. The building was well maintained with a covered porch and large windows. The attached workshop spoke of Micah's trade: anvil, forge, and tools neatly arranged. As they began unloading trunks, Ruth tried to help despite her sister's protests. Her feet tangled on the slick ground and she stumbled, color draining from her face. Caleb caught her before she could fall. "Easy there," he said gently, helping her to a porch chair. "No need to push yourself?" Sarah was already digging through her bags, pulling out carefully wrapped packets of dried herbs. "Let me make you some tea," she said, her quiet efficiency drawing the men's attention. Inside, she worked with practiced hands, measuring herbs into a cup as water heated on Micah's stove. The men paused in their work, watching as she explained each ingredient to Ruth: peppermint for strength, chamomile for calm, a pinch of willow bark for any lingering aches. "That's mighty fine knowledge," Elias said softly. Sarah glanced up, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Our neighbor back home was a healer," she explained. "She taught me what she could before." She trailed off, but they understood. Before everything changed. Before they had to leave. By noon, the trunks were all stored in the loft, and Caleb had taken charge of the cooking. The smell of beans simmering with salt pork filled the cabin as he worked cornmeal into bread dough. "Learn to cook on cattle drives," he explained as he worked. "Man can't live on jerky alone." They gathered around Micah's table, an odd family of sorts, 4 sisters and 4 mountain men, brought together by circumstance and necessity. The cornbread was warm, the beans well seasoned, and for a while, the only sounds were those of people sharing a much-needed meal. As evening approached, the men helped arrange the loft, laying down clean straw tick mattresses and hanging blankets for privacy. The sisters worked together to make the space their own, settling their few possessions with care. "It's not what we expected," Leah admitted as she helped Anna smooth a quilt. "But we're together. That's what matters." The men prepared their own bedding near the main room's fireplace, each lost in thought. This arrangement couldn't last forever. They all knew that. But for now, it was the best they could manage. "Reckon the good Lord's got his reasons for all this," Caleb said quietly as they banked the fire for the night. The others nodded, though uncertainty showed in their faces. Through the cabin walls came the sound of coyotes calling, their voices echoing off the ridges. The eerie chorus seemed to carry a warning, speaking of trials yet to come. But for now, the cabin was warm, the sisters were safe in the loft above, and tomorrow's problems could wait for tomorrow's light. Jonas stood at the window for a long moment, watching as clouds parted to reveal stars. "We'll figure this out," he said, more to himself than the others. "Just got to give it time." The fire crackled low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Upstairs, they could hear the soft murmur of the sisters' voices as they prepared for sleep. 4 men who had sought brides now found themselves guardians instead, protectors of a family that refused to be divided. Micah checked the door latch one final time before settling onto his bedroll. "Never thought I'd have a house full of women in my loft," he mused. "Never thought a lot of things," Elias replied quietly. "But here we are." They fell silent then, each man finding his own space near the fire's warmth. Outside, the coyotes called once more across the ridges, their voices carrying through the night air. Inside, 8 souls tried to find rest, each wondering what tomorrow might bring to this unexpected arrangement in the Colorado hills. 2 days of shared meals and careful politeness had settled the group into an uneasy routine. The morning sun found them loading wagons for the trip into town, their supplies running low after the unexpected arrivals. "We'll need flour and sugar," Anna said, checking her list. "And thread. Ruth's dress needs mending." The sisters climbed into the wagons, dividing themselves between Jonas's and Caleb's rigs. The short journey would take them to Silver Creek, the closest thing to civilization in their remote valley. As they rode, Sarah pointed out more herbs growing along the trail, while Leah peppered Elias with questions about the town. "Ain't much to tell," he said. "General store, bank, telegraph office, few other businesses. Church holds service twice on Sundays." The town came into view, a single dusty street lined with wooden buildings, their false fronts reaching toward the morning sky. A few horses stood hitched outside the general store, and the blacksmith's hammer rang out steadily from a shop. As the group dismounted, curious faces appeared in windows. Word of the mail-order brides had clearly spread. The sisters drew closer together, conscious of the stares. Anna lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed by the attention. Inside the general store, the proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, greeted them with forced cheerfulness. "Welcome, welcome. Heard we had new arrivals in the valley." The men began gathering supplies while the sisters examined fabric, bolts, and household necessities. Whispers followed them down the aisles. Through the store's windows, they could see townspeople gathering, drawn by the spectacle of 4 sisters who had arrived as mail-order brides. "Did you hear?" All 4 came together. "Not proper, if you ask me. Those mountain men don't know what they're getting into." The bell above the door chimed. Mr. Horace Wycliffe stepped in, his fine eastern suit stark against the store's rough wooden walls. A thin man in a black coat followed, clearly a lawyer, clutching a leather portfolio. Wycliffe's cold eyes swept over the group. His lip curled slightly as he took in the sisters' worn dresses and the men's frontier clothing. "Well, well," he said, voice dripping with false courtesy. "Our new arrivals, I see. Making quite a stir in our little community." Jonas stepped forward, positioning himself between Wycliffe and the sisters. "Just getting supplies, mister." Wycliffe. "No need for concern." "Oh, but I'm afraid there is." Wycliffe gestured to the lawyer, who began pulling papers from his portfolio. "You see, these marriage contracts were filed individually." One bride, one groom. But that's not what we have here, is it? The lawyer cleared his throat. The contract specifically states separate matches. By arriving together and refusing proper individual placement, these agreements are legally void. Anna moved to stand beside Jonas. We came in good faith, sir. The fact that we're sisters shouldn't invalidate our intention to honor these contracts. Wycliffe's smile didn't reach his eyes. My dear, intention means nothing in the face of proper documentation. But that's not all. He produced more papers with a flourish. The railroad has implemented new valley taxes. Quite substantial ones, I'm afraid, without valid marriages to secure your claims. He let the threat hang in the air. You can't do this, Caleb growled. We've worked these lands for years. I can and I will. Wycliffe straightened his jacket. The railroad requires these taxes for development. Unable to pay. Well, foreclosure is such an unfortunate business. The lawyer stepped forward, extending papers. You have 30 days to either rectify the marriage situation properly, meaning separate matches, or pay the new taxes in full. Anna snatched the papers before Jonas could take them. This is cruel, Mr. Wycliffe, using the law to drive honest people from their homes. Wycliffe's smile turned sharp. The law is the law, my dear. Perhaps you should have thought more carefully before attempting to bend it to your wishes. He turned to leave, then paused. 30 days, gentlemen. I suggest you decide quickly what matters more, your land or these women's unusual demands. The lawyer deposited more documents on the counter, then followed Wycliffe out. Through the windows, they could see the two men speaking to gathered townspeople, no doubt spreading their version of events. The store had gone silent. Mr. Jenkins busied himself with his ledger, avoiding their eyes. The sisters huddled together, while the men stood rigid with barely contained anger. We'll take our supplies, Jonas said finally, his voice tight. He placed coins on the counter with careful precision, as if restraining himself from throwing them. They loaded the wagons in tense silence. The ride back to Micah's cabin seemed longer, each person lost in their own worried thoughts. The papers Anna held felt heavy with threat. As evening approached, the sisters gathered in the loft while the men worked outside. The sound of splitting wood echoed through the valley, punctuated by the ring of Micah's hammer on hot iron. The men threw themselves into physical labor, trying to work out their frustration through sweat and strain. Up in the loft, the sisters knelt together. Anna's voice rose clear and strong, leading them in prayer. Lord, give us strength in this trial. Guide our path through these troubles. Protect this land and these good men who've shown us kindness. Help us find a way to stay together, as you have commanded us to be faithful to family. Sarah's softer voice joined in. Grant us wisdom to face these challenges. And courage, Leah added, to stand against those who would separate us. Please, Ruth whispered, don't let us lose another home. Outside, the men paused in their work, the sisters' prayers carrying through the evening air. Jonas leaned on his axe handle, jaw clenched. Caleb examined his blistered hands, shame written across his features. They were men used to solving problems with work and determination, but this threat required more than physical strength. Micah's hammer fell silent. He stared at the cooling iron on his anvil, projects meant for a future that now seemed uncertain. Elias split one last log with excessive force, the crack echoing off the hillside like a gunshot. The sun settled behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors too beautiful for such a troubled evening. The sisters' prayers continued softly, a reminder of what was at stake, not just land and homes, but the bonds of family they had all begun to feel, however unexpected they might be. Jonas gathered the men near the woodpile. We need to figure this out, he said quietly. Can't let Wycliffe win. Banker's been trying to get our land since the railroad started surveying, Caleb replied. Now he thinks he's found his chance. Those women didn't do anything wrong, Elias added. Just trying to stay together, same as we're trying to keep our homes. Micah wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of soot. 30 days ain't long to raise that kind of money. They stood in troubled silence as darkness crept into the valley. From the cabin came the smell of cooking, the sisters preparing supper despite their worries. It was a homey scent that reminded them all of what they stood to lose. The prayers from the loft had ended, replaced by the quiet sounds of the sisters moving about their evening tasks. The men gathered their tools, their anger temporarily spent, but not forgotten. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now they could only return to the cabin's warmth, carrying their helplessness like a physical weight. Inside, they found the table set, the sisters working together to prepare a simple meal. It was a picture of the home life each man had dreamed of when answering those marriage advertisements. Now it all balanced on the edge of a banker's greed and a lawyer's papers, threatening to scatter them like leaves in a storm. The evening meal was quieter than usual, everyone lost in thoughts of the 30-day deadline looming before them. But as they ate together, sharing bread and stew, there was an unspoken understanding forming. They were in this together now, whether they had planned it that way or not. Dawn crept over the Colorado Valley, painting the morning sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold. Inside Micah's cabin, Anna was already awake, moving quietly through the kitchen area. She had gathered eggs from the hen house and found a precious bit of bacon tucked away in Micah's stores. The sizzling sounds and rich aromas soon roused the others. "Smells like heaven," Caleb said, stretching as he rose from his bedroll near the fireplace. The other men stirred, drawn by the promise of a hot meal. Anna worked efficiently, making the most of their limited supplies. She mixed cornmeal with the last of the milk, creating golden Johnny cakes that bubbled on the griddle. Her movements were, sure and practiced, born from years of feeding her sisters through lean times. "Where did you find eggs?" Jonas asked, watching her work with quiet appreciation. "Your hens were hiding them under the porch," Anna replied, with a small smile. "Sometimes you have to know where to look." The sisters descended from the loft, Ruth moving carefully down the ladder with Sarah's help. They gathered around the rough-hewn table, the morning light streaming through bare windows. Leah studied those windows thoughtfully while they ate. "This place needs curtains," she declared. "Just a touch of home to brighten things up." Micah glanced up from his plate. "Ain't much call for curtains out here." "There is now," Leah said firmly. She pulled some fabric from her sewing basket. Old dresses they'd brought west, too worn for wearing but still good for other uses. "I'll show you." After breakfast, while the others dispersed to their tasks, Leah set up her sewing near the window. Micah lingered, curiosity winning over his usual reserve. He watched as she measured and cut, her fingers quick with the needle. "Here," Leah said suddenly, handing him a threaded needle. "Make yourself useful." Micah's large hands, so skilled with iron and wood, fumbled with the delicate task. The thread tangled hopelessly around his fingers. Leah's laugh rang out, bright and warm. "You're making a proper mess of it?" She untangled him, her smaller hands brushing against his. "Like this, see?" Micah's embarrassed frown slowly transformed into a grin. "Reckon I'll stick to my smithing?" Outside, Sarah had spotted some promising plants near the forest's edge. "Those leaves are good for healing," she explained to Elias, who had offered to accompany her. "Mother taught me their uses before she passed." They walked together, Sarah stopping occasionally to gather herbs into her apron. Elias moved silently beside her, alert for any danger. When he caught his hand on a thorny branch, Sarah immediately noticed the blood. "Let me see," she said softly, taking his hand in hers. Her touch was gentle as she examined the cut. From her pocket, she produced a clean cloth and some of the herbs she'd just gathered. "Ain't nothing," Elias protested, but he didn't pull away. Sarah crushed the leaves, releasing their medicine. "Sometimes small wounds need attention too." She bound his hand carefully, her movements sure and practiced. Elias watched her work, something warming in his usually guarded expression. Near the barn, Caleb was showing Ruth how to approach the milk cow. The young woman's weakness was still evident in her careful movements, but determination showed in her eyes. "Easy now," Caleb coached, his normally booming voice softened. "Old Bessie here's gentle, but you gotta let her know you mean no harm." Ruth reached out tentatively to stroke the cow's flank. "Like this?" "That's the way," Caleb encouraged. He positioned the stool and bucket, then demonstrated the milking motion. Rhythm's important, like music almost. Ruth's first attempts were hesitant, but Caleb's patient instruction helped her find the right touch. When a stream of milk finally hit the bucket, her face lit up with accomplishment. "I did it," she exclaimed, then caught her breath, the effort taking its toll. "Here now," Caleb said, concerned. "Take a rest. No need to wear yourself out." Ruth shook her head stubbornly. "I want to help." "I'm not completely useless." "Never said you were," Caleb replied softly. "Sometimes strength comes quiet-like, building day by day." The afternoon sun tracked across the sky as everyone continued their tasks. Jonas repaired fencing, keeping one eye on the ridgeline. Anna preserved the morning's eggs and salt and tended to the vegetable patch she'd discovered behind the cabin. The sounds of Micah's hammer rang out from his forge, accompanied occasionally by Leah's laughter as she worked on her curtains. As evening approached, they gathered once more around the table. The day's work had left them tired, but satisfied. Sarah's herbs hung drying from the rafters, their clean scent mixing with the aroma of Anna's cooking. Leah's half-finished curtains softened the window's harsh lines. "Reminds me of suppers back home," Caleb said, passing a plate of biscuits. "Before the war changed everything." "Tell us about it?" Ruth asked softly. Caleb's stories of his childhood in Missouri led to others sharing memories. Elias spoke of learning tracking from Cherokee neighbors. Micah described his Quaker parents' teachings. Jonas remained quiet, but his expression softened as he listened. The sisters shared too, tales of their father's farming wisdom, their mother's gentle ways. Stories of how they'd faced hardship together, refusing to be separated even when times grew desperate. The warm atmosphere was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Jonas moved to the window, his body tensing as he spotted a rider on the ridge. "Wycliffe's man," he said quietly. "Been watching all day, I reckon." The easy mood evaporated as reality intruded. Their opponents were powerful men who would use any means to claim the valley. "They think they can frighten us away," Anna said, her voice steady despite her concern. "Or force us apart," Sarah added, unconsciously moving closer to her sisters. Jonas turned from the window, his expression grave but determined. "We've all got something to lose here. The question is, do we face it alone or together?" "Together," Leah said firmly, reaching for Micah's hand. He looked startled but didn't pull away. "Ain't natural, splitting up family," Caleb agreed, his usual joviality replaced by conviction. Elias nodded silently while Sarah gave him a grateful look. Ruth, tired but resolute, straightened in her chair. "We may not have planned this," Jonas continued, "but maybe the Lord had his own ideas about how things should work out." "The marriages?" Anna asked quietly. "We'll sort that when the time comes," Jonas replied. "For now, we stand as one, against Wycliffe, against anyone who'd try to drive us out." The rider's silhouette disappeared from the ridge, but his message had been clear. Their opponents would be watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. Yet as they sat together in the lamplight, the bonds forming between them seemed to strengthen their resolve. The evening drew to a close with the sisters, retiring to the loft and the men to their bedrolls. Outside, a coyote called lonely across the valley, but inside the cabin, despite the uncertain future, there was a growing sense of unity, of family forming in unexpected ways. The Sunday morning dawned clear and crisp. Inside Micah's cabin, Anna stirred early, wanting to ensure everyone was presentable for church. The floorboards creaked softly under her feet as she moved about, stoking the fire and starting breakfast preparations. "We should attend services," she announced as the others began to stir. "It would be proper and good for us all." Jonas looked up from his coffee, considering. "Town's a fair piece by wagon. Church folk might not take kindly to our situation." "All the more reason to go," Sarah said quietly, helping Ruth brush out her hair. "We need to show we have nothing to hide." The men exchanged glances, but none argued. They'd seen how the sisters' faith sustained them through hardship. After a quick breakfast, they hitched the wagon, laying clean blankets across the wooden bed to make it more comfortable. The 8 of them crowded together, with Jonas and Caleb up front handling the reins. The wagon creaked and swayed as it followed the rutted road toward town. Ruth sat between her sisters, wrapped warmly against the morning chill. The men had cleaned up well. Faces freshly shaved, boots polished, wearing their Sunday best despite the worn edges. As they approached the white clapboard church, they could see other wagons and riders arriving. Conversations stopped as folks noticed them. Whispers followed their progress like autumn leaves skittering across the ground. "Look there, those mail-order sisters. Living together in one cabin, can you imagine? Heard they tried to trick those mountain men." Anna held her head high as they climbed down from the wagon. She smoothed her skirts, making sure Ruth was steady on her feet. The sisters had taken care with their appearance, hair neatly pinned, dresses pressed despite the wagon ride, each wearing a treasured brooch that had belonged to their mother. Preacher Hale stood at the church steps, greeting his flock. He was a spare man with kind eyes and weathered hands that spoke of hard work between sermons. When he spotted their group, his face brightened with genuine welcome. "Bless my soul, what a fine sight," he called out, striding forward to shake hands. "I'd heard we had new folks in the valley." "Welcome, welcome all." His warm greeting seemed to ease some of the tension. Other churchgoers offered cautious nods as they filed inside. The sisters and their men found seats together near the back, though Ruth's soft coughing drew concerned glances. The simple church was filled with morning light streaming through plain glass windows. Hymn books were passed, pages rustling as Preacher Hale announced the opening song. Ruth's eyes lit up at the familiar tune, and she joined in despite her weakness, her clear voice rising sweet and true. The sermon spoke of loving thy neighbor and judging not, messages that seemed particularly pointed that morning. Throughout the service, the preacher's gaze often found their group, his expression encouraging. As the congregation began to disperse afterward, Preacher Hale made his way to them. "Please stay a moment," he said. "I'd like to know you better, hear your story proper." Before they could respond, movement at the church door drew attention. A small group of Ute traders had arrived, led by a dignified elder. They carried baskets woven from sweet grass, filled with pine nuts and strips of dried meat. Several townspeople drew back, muttering. But Anna's face brightened with recognition. She stepped forward and offered a respectful greeting, her hands open in welcome as her father had taught her. "We would be honored to trade," she said clearly, including her sisters and the men in her gesture. "Our father showed us the fairness of your people's dealings." The elder, his face lined with years of wisdom, nodded approvingly. "We remember traders who speak truth," he replied in careful English. "Your father's name?" "James Whitlock," Anna answered. "He always said your people's word was better than any paper contract." A shadow crossed the elder's face. "Whitlock, yes, an honest man. Many others break promises, like winter ice." "Now see here," came a sharp voice. Mr. Wycliffe, the banker, pushed forward, his face flushed with indignation. "You can't trust these savages. They'll cheat you blind given half a chance." The elder's expression didn't change, but his shoulders stiffened. Several of his people shifted uneasily, hands moving toward knife hilts. Jonas stepped up beside Anna, his presence solid and calm. Without hesitation, he extended his hand to the elder. "Name's Jonas Harper," he said clearly. "Reckon we'd be proud to trade with you and yours." The elder clasped his hand firmly. "I am called Nantan," he replied. "Your woman speaks wisdom about trust. Perhaps not all promises fade like morning mist." Wycliffe made a disgusted sound and stalked away, but others in the crowd seemed thoughtful. Preacher Hale beamed approval as the sisters began examining the youth's goods, offering dried apples and carefully hoarded coins in exchange. The trading concluded with mutual satisfaction. Before departing, Elder Nantan pressed extra pine nuts into Ruth's hands. "For strength," he said kindly, noting her pallor. "Our mothers use these for healing." The ride home was quieter, each absorbed in thoughts about the morning's events. The wagon swayed gently as afternoon shadows lengthened across the valley. Back at the cabin, the sisters worked together preparing supper, incorporating their newly traded goods. The rich smell of stewing meat mingled with the pine nuts' sweet perfume. The men brought in fresh wood for the fire, their movements more relaxed than they'd been in days. As darkness gathered outside, they settled around the hearth with full bellies and peaceful hearts. Ruth sat close to the fire's warmth, watching the flames dance. Almost without thinking, she began to sing softly. An old hymn their mother had loved. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger, filling the cabin with clear, sweet notes. The men fell silent, hands stilling from their various tasks. Even the fire seemed to burn more quietly. One by one, her sisters joined in, their voices weaving together in familiar harmony. The simple song spoke of faith and redemption, of being lost and then found. As the last notes faded, tears shone in more than one pair of eyes. "That was right beautiful," Caleb said gruffly, clearing his throat. "Reminds me of my mama's singing," Micah added softly. "Long time since I heard music like that." Ruth blushed at the praise, but smiled, pleased she could contribute something meaningful despite her frailty. Sarah squeezed her hand proudly, while Anna and Leah exchanged knowing looks. The evening settled into comfortable quiet, broken only by the pop of burning logs and the distant cry of a nightbird. The day had brought changes subtle but significant. Respect earned at church, bridges built through trade, and hearts touched by shared song. Their unusual family might not match the town's expectations, but they'd shown grace under scrutiny and strength in unity. As the fire burned low, each felt the threads of connection growing stronger, weaving them together like the Utes' sturdy baskets. Monday morning dawned with a sky as clear as spring water. The first rays of sunlight painted the mountaintops gold, while dew sparkled on the grass around Micah's cabin. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke. Jonas stood on the porch studying the work ahead. His shoulder ached from yesterday's strain, though he tried not to show it. "Reckon that roof won't fix itself," he said, as the others gathered for breakfast. Anna was already at the cookstove, the smell of coffee and frying bacon filling the cabin. "We need to make this place proper livable," she agreed, sliding eggs onto tin plates, "especially with winter coming." Micah nodded, running a hand through his dark hair. "Been meaning to patch that leak above the loft. Just haven't had the time, what with tending cattle and all." "Well, now you've got help," Caleb said cheerfully, passing out plates. "Many hands make light work. That's what my ma always said." They settled around the rough-hewn table, shoulders touching in the crowded space. Ruth offered a quiet blessing before they ate, her voice stronger than it had been days ago. The simple meal tasted better shared, seasoned with purpose and possibility. As the sun climbed higher, they divided into work groups. Jonas and Micah gathered tools for the roof repair, while Elias and Caleb headed to the woodlot. The sisters organized their own tasks, Anna taking charge of the cabin's interior, Sarah planning an herb garden, Leah volunteering to help carry water, and Ruth eager to learn about the animals. "Mind that shoulder," Anna called to Jonas as he hoisted boards. "No sense making it worse." He gave her a look that was half annoyance, half appreciation. Been taking care of myself a long time. And now you don't have to, she replied firmly, hands on her hips. Let Micah handle the heavy lifting. To everyone's surprise, Jonas actually listened. He directed the roof work from below, while Micah and Elias climbed up to replace worn shingles. The sound of hammering soon filled the air, punctuated by good-natured shouts and laughter. Near the creek, Leah and Sarah filled wooden buckets for the garden plot they'd marked out. Elias joined them between loads of timber, offering to help carry the heavy water. I can manage, Leah insisted, though she was already breathing hard. Elias grinned, a rare expression on his usually serious face. Race you to the cabin? That's not fair, Leah protested, but she was laughing. Your legs are twice as long as mine. They set off anyway, water sloshing as they dodged around stumps and rocks. Sarah watched them with a quiet smile, seeing how Elias deliberately slowed his pace to let Leah keep up. Their laughter echoed across the clearing, drawing smiles from the others. By the creek bank, Caleb worked patiently with Ruth, showing her how to properly harness the old mule for plowing. The gentle beast stood quietly as Ruth's trembling fingers worked the leather straps. There now, Caleb encouraged, his voice soft as he guided her hands. Buckle's got to be on the outside, see? That's right. You're a natural with him. Ruth beamed at the praise, her usual pallor brightened by the morning sun. He's not nearly as frightening as I thought, she admitted, patting the mule's broad nose. Old Jake here? Nah, he's gentle as a lamb, Caleb assured her. Though he can be stubborn as sin when he's of a mind. Rather like someone else I know, Anna teased as she passed by with an armload of washing. The morning wore on as they settled into their tasks. Jonas found himself watching Anna more often than the roof work, admiring how she organized the cabin with quiet efficiency. She caught him looking once and raised an eyebrow, making him turn away quickly, though not before she saw his ears redden. Sarah worked steadily in her newly marked herb garden, carefully transplanting the seedlings she'd gathered. Her knowledge impressed them all, which plants for healing, which for cooking, which to keep the mice away. Even Elias lingered to listen as she explained each one's purpose. By midday, the autumn sun beat down strong enough to raise sweat. They paused for a simple meal of bread and dried beef, gathering in the shade of a big pine. The mood was light, despite aching muscles and blistered hands. Even Ruth managed to eat well, color in her cheeks from the morning's activity. Roof's nearly done, Micah reported, stretching his back. Should hold tight through winter now. Woodpile's growing too, Caleb added. Another day's work should see us right for the cold months. The garden patch is turned, Elias said. Might get some hardy greens in before first frost. Jonas nodded approval, though his eyes kept straying to the ridgeline. The others followed his gaze, their good mood dimming slightly. In the distance, 2 riders sat their horses, watching the cabin. Banker's men, Micah muttered. Been there most of the morning? Let them watch, Anna said firmly. We're not doing anything wrong. But they all felt the shadow of threat, like a cloud passing over the sun. The men exchanged glances, an unspoken agreement passing between them. The afternoon brought more progress. The roof was finished. The woodpile grew and the garden took shape. Leah managed to hang curtains in the cabin's windows, simple fabric that still brought a touch of homey comfort to the rough interior. The sound of her humming mixed with the ring of axes and the thud of split logs. Sarah worked alongside Elias, teaching him the names and uses of her herbs. He proved an attentive student, his quiet nature matching her gentle instruction. Their hands sometimes brushed as they worked the soil, causing both to glance away shyly. Ruth gained confidence with the mule, Caleb's patient guidance helping her overcome her fears. By day's end, she could harness Jake properly and lead him to the creek for water. Her sisters watched proudly as she managed these small victories over her weakness. As the sun began to set, Anna called them in for supper. She'd managed to create a hearty stew from their stores, the smell drawing everyone to the table. They were dirty, tired, and sore, but satisfied with the day's accomplishments. "Place is starting to feel like home," Leah observed, looking around at their improvements. "Still needs work," Jonas said gruffly, but his tone was warmer than usual. "Everything worth having needs work," Anna replied, passing him a bowl. "And willing hands to do it." They ate together, the conversation easy and natural. Even Ruth contributed, describing how she'd learned to handle the mule. The cabin felt warmer somehow, and not just from the cook stove's heat. But as darkness fell, reality intruded again. The men stepped outside, speaking in low voices. Jonas's expression was grave as he outlined a guard schedule. "Take 2-hour shifts," he instructed. "Any sign of trouble, wake the others." The other men nodded, knowing the threat was real. The banker's men had watched all day, and night would give cover for mischief. They couldn't risk leaving the women unprotected. Inside, the sisters prepared for sleep, spreading blankets in the loft. But they too felt the tension, hearing the men's quiet movements like low as the first watch began. "Will it always be like this?" Ruth whispered in the darkness. "No," Anna answered firmly. "We'll find a way through." "We always have." The night settled around the cabin like a thick blanket. Stars wheeled overhead as the men took their turns standing guard, watching the shadows for any sign of movement. But their thoughts weren't just on danger. They dwelt also on the day's shared work, shared meals, shared purpose. For the first time since the sisters arrived, the cabin felt like more than just shelter. It felt like the beginning of something they'd all been seeking, though none would have admitted it. Something like family. Outside, crickets chirped in the darkness. An owl called from the forest edge, and always, the men kept their vigil, protecting what was becoming precious to them all. The evening shadows lengthened as the group finished their supper. Anna's hands trembled slightly as she cleared the wooden bowls, her mind heavy with the decision she knew she must make. She had carried this burden since leaving Missouri, waiting for the right moment. Now, with danger pressing in from all sides, that moment had come. "There's something we need to show you," she said quietly, her voice carrying in the hushed cabin. The men looked up, noting the serious tone. Even Ruth, who had been dozing by the fire, straightened. Anna nodded to Sarah, who climbed carefully to the loft. They heard her rustling through their few possessions. When she returned, she carried a flat packet wrapped carefully in oilskin, bound with twine. "What's that?" Jonas asked, his deep voice gentle but wary. Anna's fingers worked at the knots. "Something our father left us. Something that might help us all." The twine came loose, and she unfolded the oilskin with reverence. Inside lay several sheets of paper, yellowed but still crisp, the writing clear and official. "These are water rights," she explained, smoothing them on the rough table. "Partial rights to the creek that runs through this valley. Father filed the claim years ago, before she swallowed hard. Before the fever took him and Mother." The men gathered closer, their shadows dancing in the lamplight as they studied the documents. Micah whistled low between his teeth. "These look proper," Caleb said, running a calloused finger along the official seals. "Filed with the territorial office, dated 8 years back." "Why didn't you tell us this before?" Jonas asked, but there was no accusation in his tone, only curiosity. Leah spoke up from where she sat beside Ruth. "We were afraid. So many tried to cheat us after Father died. Men with smooth words and legal papers, trying to take what little we had left. The broker who arranged our matches," Sarah added softly. "He asked too many questions about our property. We learned to keep silent." Anna met Jonas's steady gaze. "We didn't come here to cause trouble or make claims. We came hoping to find good men, honest men, who might give us a chance at a real home." Her voice strengthened. "But now, with Wycliffe threatening everyone—" "This changes things," Elias said, studying the papers intently. These rights, even partial ones, they give us leverage against the banker. Jonas nodded slowly. Water rights trump most other claims out here. Wycliffe can't develop anything without access to the creek. He looked at Anna with new respect. No wonder you've been guarding the secret. It also makes you bigger targets, Micah pointed out. If Wycliffe finds out about this, he'll stop at nothing to get these papers, Caleb finished grimly. Ruth's soft voice carried from the fireplace. We won't let him use the water rights for greed. Father always said water should be shared, not hoarded. She coughed slightly, and Sarah moved to pour her some tea. The rights could protect all the homesteads, Anna explained. Give us a way to stand against Wycliffe legally, but only if we work together. The men exchanged long looks, years of friendship and trust passing between them. Finally, Jonas spoke for them all. We'll protect you, he said simply. You and these papers both. His rough hand covered Anna's where it rested on the documents. You've trusted us with this secret. We won't betray that trust. Tears gathered in Anna's eyes, but she blinked them back. We've prayed so long for help, for guidance. Perhaps God led us here for just this purpose. Leah moved to the table, placing her hand atop Jonas's and Anna's. Not just for the papers, she said softly. For all of us. One by one, the others joined them, hands linking over the documents that represented both hope and danger. Even Ruth rose shakily from her chair, supported by Caleb, to add her touch to the circle. We should hide these properly, Elias said after a moment. Somewhere safe. Jonas nodded. I know a place. There's a loose stone in my cabin's hearth behind the firebox. No one would think to look there. We'll move them tomorrow, Micah suggested. Too risky tonight with watchers about. Sarah began rewrapping the papers carefully in their oilskin covering. Father would be pleased, she murmured. To know his foresight might help protect not just us, but others too. The group settled back, the weight of shared responsibility heavy in the air. Caleb added wood to the fire, while Leah poured fresh coffee. The simple actions helped steady their nerves. We should pray, Ruth said suddenly. For courage to face whatever comes. Anna reached for her sister's hands, and the men bowed their heads respectfully. Ruth's voice, though weak, carried clear in the quiet cabin. Lord, guide our steps in the days ahead. Give us wisdom to use these papers justly, strength to protect what's right, and courage to face those who would harm us. Watch over us all as we become family. Amen, they whispered together as the candles burned low, casting long shadows on the walls. A gust of wind rattled the newly hung curtains. Through the window they could see the moon rising over the ridge, and on that wind came a scent that made the men exchange worried glances. The faint but unmistakable smell of smoke from somewhere in the distance. Jonas moved to the door, peering out into the darkness. The others waited, tension building in their shoulders. Stay inside, he said quietly. Caleb, take first watch. Micah, you're next. Elias and I will split the late hours. His hand rested on his rifle, but his eyes sought Anna's. We'll keep you safe. All of you. Anna nodded, gathering her sisters closer. The water rights papers lay between them, wrapped once more in their protective covering. Such a small packet to carry such large hopes and such grave dangers. The wind gusted again, stronger now, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called. The night ahead would be long, but they would face it together, bound by trust and the promise of protection. The morning sun painted the valley gold as wagons rolled into Caleb's homestead. Neighbors from miles around arrived carrying tools, food, and children. The excitement of a barn raising hung in the air like music. Anna and her sisters had risen before dawn to start preparations. Now great iron kettles bubbled with savory stew over open fires, while baskets of fresh bread waited on makeshift tables. The scent of coffee mixed with wood shavings and fresh-turned earth. Never seen such a turnout, Caleb said, his usual cheerful face beaming as he greeted each arrival. His empty yard would soon hold a proper barn, if all went. Well, before sunset. Ruth sat in the shade, sorting nails into bins. Her cheeks held more color than they had in weeks, and she smiled as children darted past, chasing Caleb's chickens across the yard. "Careful now," she called, when one small boy nearly stumbled. "Those hens bite." The men gathered around Jonas, who stood with rolled blueprints, directing teams to different tasks. His quiet authority drew respect. Everyone knew his skill with timber. "We'll start with the foundation posts," he explained, marking measurements in the dirt with a stick. "Then raise the main beams before noon, while we have the most hands." Sarah had set up a small medicine station in the shade of a wagon, laying out her herbs and bandages. "There's always someone needs tending at a raising," she explained to Mrs. Peterson, who admired her neat preparations. "Better to be ready." Leah bounced between groups, her energy infectious as she carried water and passed messages. When Elias called her over to help with beams, her eyes lit up. "Show me how," she insisted, taking up a hammer with determination. "Like this," Elias demonstrated, guiding her hands to hold the nail straight. "Tap gentle at first, then give it strength." His usual quiet manner softened as he watched her succeed, pride showing in his slight smile. The morning progressed in a symphony of work, hammers ringing, saws rasping, voices calling measurements and warnings. The foundation posts went in true and steady. When the first main beam needed raising, every able body gathered. "Ready now," Jonas called. "Lift together." The massive timber rose slowly, guided by ropes and poles, until it stood vertical against the blue sky. A cheer went up from the crowd. Anna wiped sweat from her brow as she stirred the stew pots. The sight of so many working together, neighbor helping neighbor, brought tears to her eyes. This was what they'd prayed for, not just survival, but community. By midday, the frame began taking shape. Smaller teams worked on different sections, while others took breaks to eat and rest. Sarah moved among them, treating splinters and scrapes with gentle efficiency. When Micah smashed his thumb, her herb poultice eased the throbbing enough for him to return to work. "Much obliged," he said, flexing his bandaged hand. "Don't know what we'd do without your healing ways." Ruth surprised everyone by organizing the children into a game of collecting dropped nails. "A penny for every 10 you find," she offered, and soon had eager helpers keeping the work area clear. Caleb watched her with obvious admiration. "She's got away with little ones," he remarked to Anna. "Never seen my yard so tidy during a raising." The afternoon brought fresh energy as the roof beams went up. Leah proved fearless with heights, scrambling along boards to pass tools to workers. Elias kept close watch, but his worry turned to respect for her sure-footedness. "You'd make a fine carpenter," he told her as they secured brackets together. She grinned, hammer swinging true. "Reckon I might," at that. As the sun began its descent, the barn's skeleton stood complete against the dimming sky. Lanterns were lit, hanging from posts to illuminate the finishing work. Someone brought out a fiddle, and music drifted across the yard. The women laid out supper on plank tables, stew, bread, pies, and coffee. Children dozed on blankets while adults gathered in groups, cooking food and satisfaction in the day's accomplishment. The fiddler struck up a livelier tune, and couples began to dance. Jonas found Anna sitting alone, watching the celebrations. He settled beside her, offering a cup of coffee. "Been meaning to thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "Showing us what's possible when folks work together. Been too long alone up here. All of us." Anna's hands tightened around her cup. "We've been lonely too." After losing mother and father. She paused. "But today, seeing everyone come together like this, it feels like hope." "Feels like home," Jonas agreed softly. Across the yard, Ruth sat with Caleb near one of the fire pits. The flames painted her face with warmth as she smiled. Really smiled, without the strain of illness showing through. "Tell me about your cooking," she encouraged him. "I've never met a man who could make beans taste so fine." Caleb ducked his head, pleased. Just patience, mainly. Good things take time. His eyes met hers briefly, then returned to the fire. Sarah worked nearby, putting away her medical supplies as the light faded. Elias appeared silently beside her, helping to sort bandages. 17 splinters, 3 smashed fingers, and 1 scraped knee, she reported. Not bad for a barn raising. You've got healing hands, he said simply. The quiet compliment brought color to her cheeks. The evening deepened into contentment. Neighbors began gathering their families, heading home with promises to return for roofing later in the week. The fiddler played one last slow tune as lanterns burned low. Leah helped collect tools, humming along with the music. Best day I can remember, she declared to anyone listening. Even better than the harvest festivals back home. The 4 sisters gathered to wash dishes by lamplight while the men secured the site for night. The new barn's frame cast long shadows across the yard, a promise of permanence and purpose. Did you see Mrs. Peterson's youngest girl? Ruth asked, passing clean plates to Anna. She followed me all afternoon helping with the nail collection, said she wants to be a teacher someday. Speaking of teaching, Sarah added, Elias showed me which forest plants can be used for rope making. There's so much to learn here. Leah balanced a stack of bowls. And so much to build. Who knew hammering could be such fun? Anna watched her sister's animated faces, seeing hope bloom where weariness had lived too long. The day's joy had worked deeper healing than any medicine. As the last wagon rolled away, crickets took up their evening song. The valley settled into peaceful darkness, except for the ridgeline, where unknown figures watched the homestead below. The banker's men noted the new barn, the signs of community strength with calculating eyes. But for now, their presence went unnoticed by those who had lived this day of pure joy. The sisters bedded down in their loft while the men took their usual places by. The fire. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they rested in the satisfaction of work well done and bonds grown stronger. Midnight settled deep over the valley, stars glittering through thin clouds. The newly raised barn stood proud against the darkness, its fresh-cut timbers still fragrant with pine sap. Most of the valley's residents had returned to their homes hours ago, leaving only the sisters and the 4 men sleeping at the homestead. The night air carried a bitter chill. Jonas, taking the first watch, pulled his coat tighter as he walked the perimeter. Something felt wrong. The horses in the corral stomped restlessly, and the nightbirds had gone silent. A flicker of orange caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just moonlight on the new barn's beams. Then he saw the smoke. Fire! Jonas's shout split the night. The barn's burning! Flames erupted along the eastern wall, racing up the fresh timber like lightning through dry grass. The crack and roar of fire shattered the midnight peace. Jonas ran toward the cabin, bellowing warnings. Everyone up! Fire in the barn. Doors slammed as people spilled out into the yard. Anna emerged from the cabin, her face pale in the growing firelight. Dear God, no, she whispered, watching flames devour their day's work. Micah and Elias sprinted to the well, working the pump handle furiously. Form a line, Micah shouted. We need buckets. Sarah organized the sisters, passing pails down the line. Ruth, still weak but determined, steadied herself between Leah and Anna. Nearby homesteaders, seeing the glow against the sky, began arriving with more buckets and willing hands. The horses screamed in terror as smoke billowed. Caleb fought through the heat to throw open the corral gate, driving them to safety. Children from neighboring farms huddled together, crying as they watched the destruction. Their mothers gathered them close, whispering prayers. There! Micah's sharp eyes caught movement in the shadows. Riders on the ridge! Jonas grabbed his rifle from the cabin wall. 3 of them, heading east. He and Micah swung onto their horses, spurs striking hard as they galloped after the retreating figures. The water brigade fought desperately, but the flames had too much of a hold. Timbers groaned and crackled, sending showers of sparks into the night sky. The heat drove everyone back as the roof began to sag. "Get clear," Elias warned. "She's coming down." With a thunderous crash, the barn collapsed inward. A geyser of embers shot skyward, carried on waves of superheated air. The sisters clung together, watching their hope literally go up in flames. Sarah pressed her face into Anna's shoulder, unable to bear the sight. Leah's voice cracked with anguish. All that work, all that joy. She kicked an empty bucket in frustration, sending it clattering across the yard. Ruth sank to her knees in the dirt, exhausted by grief and exertion. "Why would anyone do this?" she asked, her voice small against the fire's roar. The answer came thundering back with Jonas and Micah's return. They rode hard into the yard, faces black with anger and soot. "Wycliffe's men," Micah spat, dismounting. "Saw them clear as day in the moonlight, 3 of his hired guns heading for town." Jonas cradled his rifle, knuckles white on the stock. "We can catch them before dawn. Make them pay for this." "No." Anna stepped forward, placing herself between Jonas and his horse. "You can't." "They burned our barn," Micah argued, his voice harsh with rage. "Destroyed all our work. Nearly killed our horses." Sarah moved to stand beside her sister. "And spilling their blood will destroy everything else we're trying to build here." "The law," Jonas began, but Anna cut him off. "The law won't help us if you become murderers," she insisted. "Think. Wycliffe wants us to react with violence. He's trying to prove we're dangerous, uncivilized." Elias, who had been quietly watching the barn's remains settle into glowing coals, spoke up. "She's right. Violence will only give him what he wants." The sisters formed a line between the men and their horses. Ruth, though trembling with fatigue, stood firm. "Please," she begged, "don't let hate poison what we have here." Leah reached for Micah's clenched fist. "We can rebuild. Together like before, but if you ride out seeking vengeance, something precious will break that can't be fixed." The tension stretched like a bowstring about to snap. Jonas stared hard at Anna, his face a battlefield of rage and reason. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to back down. "Your father's water rights," he said finally. "That's what they're after. They're trying to drive us to violence so they can claim we're unfit to hold the land." Anna nodded slowly. "Which is why we must answer with peace. Show them, and the whole valley, that we're better than their schemes." Gradually, the fury drained from Jonas's face, leaving behind bone-deep weariness. He lowered the rifle. "You have courage, Anna Whitlock. More than most men I know." Micah's shoulders slumped as his own anger burned out. Leah still held his hand, and he squeezed it gently. "Reckon I've been too long in the mountains," he admitted. "Nearly forgot there's stronger ways to fight than with bullets." The neighbors who had come to help fight the fire gathered closer, drawn by the confrontation's resolution. Mrs. Peterson stepped forward, her gray hair askew from the night's chaos. "We'll all help rebuild," she declared firmly. "Every hand that raised this barn today will return to raise it again." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The preacher, who had arrived during the height of the fire, raised his voice in prayer. "Lord, let us answer destruction with creation, hatred with love." Sarah began organizing care for those who had minor burns or smoke irritation. Her quiet competence helped restore calm to the shaken community. Children stopped crying as parents led them home, promising to return with daylight. Around the dying embers of the barn, the 4 sisters clasped hands with the 4 men who had become so much more than reluctant hosts. The circle they formed was a promise stronger than fire, a defiance more powerful than violence. "We'll face this together," Anna said softly, but her voice carried to all of them. "With mercy, not malice." Jonas looked down, at their joined hands, then up at the stars still visible through wisps of smoke. "Together," he agreed, and the word became both oath and prayer. The night's peace had been shattered, but as the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern peaks, a different kind of peace settled over the valley. It was the peace of people choosing light over darkness, creation over destruction. love over hate. The barn's remains smoldered, sending thin tendrils of smoke into the lightning sky. But the bonds forged in facing this crisis smoldered too, growing stronger in the crucible of shared trial. Tomorrow would bring the work of rebuilding, but tonight had proven that their foundation was built on something fireproof: the power of mercy over violence and the strength of united hearts. Dawn crept over the valley, painting the smoke-stained sky in muted shades of pink and gray. The first rays of sunlight revealed the full extent of the destruction. Where Caleb's proud new barn had stood just hours before, only blackened timbers and ash remained. The acrid smell of burnt wood hung heavy in the morning air. Jonas Harper stood at the edge of the ruins, his boots crunching on charred splinters. His weathered face was etched with fatigue from the sleepless night, but his eyes held steady determination. Around him, neighbors began arriving, drawn by both sympathy and outrage. "This ain't right," Tom Peterson declared, gripping his hat tight. "Burning a man's barn? That's the work of cowards." Martha Wilson nodded vigorously, her gray bun bobbing. "Those bankers' men need teaching. My William and the other boys would ride with you, Jonas, just say the word." More voices joined in, urging revenge. The anger was a living thing, crackling through the gathered crowd like the flames that had devoured the barn. But Jonas raised his hand, silencing the mutters. "Listen," he said, his deep voice carrying across the yard. "I thank you for your loyalty. But we won't answer fire with gunpowder." "They'll think we're weak," someone called out. Jonas shook his head. "There's nothing weak about choosing justice over vengeance. We'll fight this battle, but we'll fight it proper, with the law on our side." Anna emerged from the cabin, carrying a large pot of coffee. Sarah and Leah followed with baskets of biscuits they'd baked before sunrise. The simple act of providing breakfast amid disaster seemed to settle the crowd's restless energy. "There's work to be done," Anna announced, pouring steaming coffee into cups. "Who's willing to help clear this mess?" The response was immediate. Men shed their coats, women rolled up their sleeves, and the community moved forward with purpose. They formed teams, carefully sorting salvageable lumber from the wreckage. Ruth, still pale but determined, made her way to the makeshift corral where they'd housed the rescued animals. A young foal stood trembling in the corner, its coat still bearing traces of soot. The poor creature had barely escaped when Caleb freed the horses. "Hush now," Ruth murmured, approaching slowly. "You're safe here." She began to sing softly, an old hymn her mother had taught them. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound." The foal's ears pricked forward, drawn by her gentle voice. As Ruth continued singing, the animal's trembling eased. Caleb paused in his work nearby, watching the scene with quiet admiration. Throughout the morning, the sisters moved among the workers, ensuring everyone had food and water. They turned the task of clearing debris into something almost resembling a social gathering, with shared meals and conversation amid the labor. "Look here," Micah called out around midday, holding up a partially burned beam. "The wood underneath is still sound. We can salvage more than I thought." Elias wiped sweat from his brow. "Reckon we could start rebuilding next week, weather permitting." The talk of rebuilding sparked hope. Neighbors began offering supplies, extra lumber, nails, their own time and labor. What had started as a day of desolation was transforming into one of unexpected unity. Sarah worked alongside Mrs. Peterson, sorting through the ashes for any tools that might be saved. "Sometimes," she mused, "trouble brings out the best in people." "That it does," the older woman agreed. "Though I never thought I'd see the day when our scattered homesteads pulled together like this." By late afternoon, the worst of the debris had been cleared. The burned ground was raked smooth, ready for new foundations. Jonas gathered everyone in the yard, where Anna and her sisters had set out a simple but filling supper of beans, cornbread, and apple pie. "Before we eat," Jonas announced, "I want to share our plan." He glanced at Anna, who nodded encouragingly. "Tomorrow we ride to the county seat. We have documents, legitimate contracts, and water rights that need to be presented to a judge." "Water rights?" Tom Peterson's eyebrows shot up. "That explains Wycliffe's spite. The sister's father filed claims years ago. Jonas explained. Legal claims that could protect not just our homesteads, but the whole valley's water access. Understanding dawned on faces throughout the crowd. Water rights were the key to everything in this arid land. No wonder the banker had resorted to intimidation. We'll need witnesses, Micah added. Folks willing to testify about what happened here. Hands rose without hesitation. The valley's people had chosen their side. Preacher Hale, who had been quietly helping all day, stepped forward. The good book tells us to overcome evil with good. You've chosen a righteous path, turning to the law instead of revenge. The Lord will honor that. Ruth's clear voice rose in another hymn, and others joined in. The simple melody carried across the valley as the sun began to set, drawing everyone together in shared purpose and hope. Jonas found himself standing next to Anna as twilight deepened. Your sister has a gift, he said, nodding toward Ruth. Healing isn't just about herbs and bandages. No, Anna agreed softly. Sometimes it's about helping hearts heal too. She studied his face in the fading light. Are you certain about tomorrow? Facing Wycliffe in court won't be easy. I'm certain. Jonas's voice was firm. What happened here today, the way everyone came together, that's worth fighting for. The right way. The evening ended with neighbors departing in twos and threes, each promising to return with supplies for rebuilding. What had begun as a day of devastation had forged something precious, a community bound together by shared hardship and common purpose. As stars began appearing in the smoke-cleared sky, the 4 sisters and 4 men sat around the outdoor fire. They were exhausted, but oddly peaceful. The ruins of the barn were no longer a symbol of defeat, but a promise of renewal. We should prepare for tomorrow, Anna said, pulling out the oilskin packet containing their father's water rights. The judge will need to see everything. Jonas nodded. We'll leave at first light. It's a long ride to the county seat. They spread the documents carefully, checking every detail. Their future, and perhaps the valley's, would depend on these papers and the justice they hoped to find. But they faced that challenge with new strength, the strength of people who had chosen the harder right over the easier wrong. Ruth's foal nickered softly from its makeshift pen, no longer afraid. Like the animal, the valley's fear was giving way to something stronger, the courage to face tomorrow together armed with law and unity instead of bullets and revenge. The fire crackled, casting warm light on determined faces. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but tonight they had already won an important victory. Over themselves, over the impulse to answer violence with violence. In choosing justice over vengeance, they had discovered a power greater than any weapon, the strength of united hearts standing firm for what was right. Dawn painted the Colorado sky in streaks of pink and gold as the group gathered in the yard. Jonas and Micah hitched the strongest horses to the sturdy wagon, while Caleb checked the wheels and axles one final time. They couldn't risk a breakdown on the long journey ahead. Anna emerged from the cabin carrying the oilskin packet, holding it close like a precious thing. Sarah followed with baskets of provisions, dried meat, cornbread, apples, and coffee. Leah helped Ruth with their small traveling bags, watching her sister's steps carefully on the dewy ground. Documents are secure? Jonas asked as Anna approached. Yes, she answered, patting the inner pocket of her coat where she'd hidden them. And I have Father's old journal too, showing when he first registered the water claim. Elias rode up on his bay horse, leading 3 other saddled mounts. Trails clear ahead? No sign of anyone watching. The morning air held a bite of autumn chill as they loaded the wagon. Quilts and blankets were tucked around Ruth, who insisted on riding despite her frailty. I won't stay behind, she said, firmly when Caleb suggested it. We face this together. The sun had barely cleared the eastern ridge when they set out. Jonas and Micah rode ahead as scouts, while Elias brought up the rear. The wagon creaked along between them, Anna handling the reins with quiet confidence. The trail wound through stands of aspen, their leaves starting to turn golden. Every bump and dip required careful navigation. Sarah pointed out herbs along the way, marking spots to remember for future. Gathering, Leah kept their spirits up by singing trail songs she'd learned as a girl. By midday, the rough track had taken its toll. They stopped to rest the horses near a meadow bright with late wildflowers. While Caleb prepared a simple meal, Ruth walked carefully among the blooms, gathering a small bouquet. "These remind me of home," she said softly to Caleb as he brought her a tin cup of coffee. "Mother's garden always had flowers, even in hard times." He smiled, settling beside her on a sun-warmed rock. "Reckon we could plant some around the cabin come spring." The afternoon brought steeper terrain. The wagon wheels struggled over rocky patches, forcing everyone to walk beside it at times. Jonas and Anna took turns driving, their hands brushing briefly during the exchange of reins. "You handle horses well," he observed. "Father taught us early," she replied. "Said a farmer's daughter should know every job on the land." As the sun began to set, they made camp beside a clear creek, the sound of running water mixed with the evening songs of birds. Caleb built a fire while Micah and Elias tended the horses. The sisters spread blankets and set out supper, the last of the morning's cornbread, beans, and dried apples. Around the flames, the group's mood lightened despite their weariness. Leah couldn't resist teasing Elias about his quiet ways. "Do you ever smile under that beard?" she asked, eyes twinkling. To everyone's surprise, he did. A quick flash of warmth that transformed his usual stern expression. "When there's cause," he answered. Ruth sat close to Caleb, her slight frame leaning against his solid shoulder as fatigue caught up with her. He draped his coat around her without comment, his gentle care speaking louder than words. Away from the fire circle, Jonas and Anna walked along the creek bank, their low voices serious in the gathering dark. "What troubles you?" she asked, noting the worry lines around his eyes. He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "I've seen how the law can twist, Anna. Wycliffe has money and influence. Our truth might not be enough." "Then we'll need faith as well as facts," she replied. "Father always said justice may sleep, but never dies. Your father seems to have been a wise man." "He was." Anna's voice softened with memory. "He taught us to stand together, to trust in God's providence, even when the path ahead looks dark." Jonas studied her face in the fading light. "You've carried your sister's welfare on your shoulders a long time." "As you've carried the valleys," she answered. "Perhaps neither of us needs to carry our burdens alone anymore." They rejoined the others as night settled fully over the camp. Sarah had made her herb tea, its sweet warmth helping ease the day's aches. One by one, they settled into their blankets under the stars. Elias took first watch, his rifle across his knees. Morning came with frost silvering the grass. They ate quickly, hot coffee and the last of their bread, eager to cover the remaining distance. The second day's travel proved easier, the trail widening as they descended toward more settled country. By early afternoon, they crested a final ridge. Below them stretched a broad valley, and at its heart lay the county town. The sight brought them all to a halt. "Bigger than I remembered," Micah muttered. The main street ran straight as a ruler, lined with false-fronted buildings. Saloons dominated one side, their gaudy signs competing for attention. At the far end stood the courthouse, a two-story brick structure topped by a copper dome that gleamed in the sun. "Wycliffe's fortress," Jonas said grimly. Ruth's soft voice carried unexpected steel. "But he doesn't know what we bring with us." "More than just papers," Sarah added. "Truth and right." They took a moment to straighten clothes and dust off their boots before starting down. Anna touched the documents hidden in her coat, drawing strength from their presence. The sisters exchanged glances, each finding courage in the other's eyes. The wagon wheels rumbled on the hard-packed street as they entered town. Heads turned to watch their passage. a group of mountain men and 4 proper women, travel-stained but holding themselves with dignity. They pulled up before the courthouse steps just as the afternoon sun touched the dome above, making it flame like a beacon. Jonas helped Anna down from the wagon, his hand steady beneath hers. The others gathered close, forming a tight circle of support. For a moment, they stood silent, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. "Well," Leah said brightly, breaking the tension, "we didn't come all this way just to admire the view." Her words drew smiles, even a quiet chuckle from Elias. They had indeed come for more than looking. They had come for justice, carrying hope and determination along with their precious documents. Together, they climbed the courthouse steps, ready to face whatever waited within. The heavy doors swung open before them, revealing a dim interior that smelled of dust and old paper. Somewhere inside, Wycliffe waited, confident in his power and influence. But he would soon learn that he faced more than just a few mountain men and mail-order brides. He faced a family, forged by hardship and faith, standing united for what was right. The courthouse interior felt cavernous, with high windows letting dusty shafts of afternoon light fall across worn wooden benches. Word had spread quickly through the small town, and those benches were now packed with onlookers eager to witness the confrontation. Anna's heart beat faster as she walked down the center aisle, her sisters close behind. The mountain men followed, their boots making hollow sounds on the planked floor. She caught whispers from the crowd, some sympathetic, others skeptical. At the front of the room, behind a heavy oak desk raised on a platform, sat Judge Harrison. His lined face and steel-gray hair spoke of decades dispensing frontier justice. To one side, Wycliffe lounged in a chair, looking smug in his tailored suit. His lawyer, a sharp-featured man named Morton, arranged papers with precise movements. "All rise," called the bailiff, and the rustle of movement filled the room. The judge peered over his spectacles at the gathered group. "I understand we have a dispute regarding marriage contracts and land claims," he said, his voice carrying. "Clearly. Mr. Morton, you may present your case." The lawyer rose smoothly, adjusting his vest. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. These men entered into individual contracts for mail-order brides. Instead, they received a group of sisters attempting to manipulate the arrangement. The contracts are clearly void." He lifted documents with a flourish. "Furthermore, my client, Mr. Wycliffe, holds legal rights to assess fees on valley properties. The occupants are in arrears." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Anna felt Jonas tense beside her, but his face remained calm. "And the defense?" Judge Harrison asked, looking toward their group. Anna stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. She had practiced these words in her mind during their journey, praying for clarity and strength. "Your Honor, I speak for my sisters and these good men who have offered us shelter and protection." She lifted her chin, meeting the judge's gaze directly. "We answered the advertisements honestly, making clear to the marriage broker that we wished to remain together. He assured us this was acceptable." She withdrew the carefully preserved packet from her coat. "But more importantly, we bring evidence of prior claims to the valley." Wycliffe shifted forward, his expression darkening. Morton started to object, but the judge waved him to silence. "These documents," Anna continued, "show our father's registered water rights from 15 years ago. He filed the claim before illness took him from us, always intending to settle here." She passed the papers to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. As Judge Harrison examined the documents, the courthouse door opened. Preacher Hale stepped inside, his worn Bible tucked under one arm. He made his way forward, nodding respectfully to the bench. "Your Honor, if I may speak to the character of these people?" The judge gestured for him to continue. "I've witnessed their conduct since arrival," the preacher said, his clear voice carrying conviction. "The sisters have shown nothing but grace and honest dealing. They attend services, help neighbors, and demonstrate the highest Christian virtues. The men have likewise proven honorable in their treatment of these women, offering protection without demanding improper liberties." More movement at the door drew attention. 3 Ute men entered, including Grey Wolf, an elder respected throughout the valley. They stood quietly at the back, their presence unexpected but powerful. Morton sneered. "Your Honor, surely you won't consider testimony from—" "Every witness has the right to speak," Judge Harrison cut him off sharply. "Step forward, sir." Grey Wolf walked to the front, his bearing dignified. In careful English, he spoke of trading with the sisters, of Anna's respectful ways and fair bargaining. "They honor old agreements," he said, "like their father's paper shows. Not like others who speak sweet, but deal false." His glance toward Wycliffe needed no translation. The banker's face had grown steadily redder. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently, but Morton looked increasingly uncomfortable. Judge Harrison spent several minutes reviewing the documents, the scratching of his pen the only sound in the tense room. Finally, he set them down and removed his spectacles. "The law serves justice, not mere technicalities," he began. "These water rights were properly registered and never surrendered. They grant legitimate claim to land use." He fixed Wycliffe with a stern look. "Your supposed fees are hereby voided as unlawful attempt at extortion." Wycliffe shot to his feet. "This is outrageous. I'll appeal to—" The judge's gavel crashed down. "Be silent, sir, or face contempt charges." He turned to address the wider room. "As for the marriage contracts, I find no evidence of fraud. The women made their intentions clear. The men have demonstrated honorable conduct. The contracts stand as valid, pending proper ceremony." Relief swept through Anna so strongly her knees weakened. She felt Sarah's hand slip into hers, squeezing tight. Leah was beaming, while Ruth's eyes shone with happy tears. "This case is closed," Judge Harrison declared, bringing down his gavel with finality. "May God grant you all the wisdom to build something worthy of his blessing in that valley." Wycliffe stormed from the courthouse, his face mottled with rage. Morton gathered his papers hastily and followed. But Anna barely noticed their departure, surrounded by the joy of her sisters and the quiet satisfaction in the mountain men's faces. Townspeople came forward to offer congratulations. Grey Wolf and his companions exchanged dignified nods with Jonas before departing. Preacher Hale moved through the group, sharing handshakes and warm words. "The Lord does work in mysterious ways," he said, smiling. "Who would have thought 4 mail-order brides and 4 mountain men could teach us all something about justice and faith?" Outside the courthouse, afternoon sunlight bathed the street in golden warmth. Anna stood for a moment on the steps, breathing deeply. The weight of worry she'd carried for so long began to lift at last. She felt Jonas step up beside her. "You spoke well in there," he said quietly. "We all did what was right," she replied. "That's what mattered." Around them, the others were already discussing the ride home. Elias helped Leah into the wagon while Sarah organized their supplies. Caleb had his arm ready to assist Ruth, but she managed the step up herself, her strength growing daily. The victory was more than just legal papers, Anna realized. It was the triumph of truth over greed, of community over corruption. Most of all, it was proof that God had indeed guided their desperate prayers when they'd first answered those marriage advertisements. Looking at the family they'd become, mountain men and sisters united by hardship and hope, she knew their father would have approved. His water rights had protected them, just as he'd always tried to do in life. The late afternoon sun stretched their shadows long across the courthouse steps as they prepared for the journey home. But now it truly would be home, secured by justice and shared faith in each other. The wagon wheels creaked steadily as they made their way home, the afternoon sun warming their backs. Despite their exhaustion from the courthouse battle, laughter rang out frequently. Leah kept everyone entertained with her dramatic retelling of Wycliffe's red-faced exit, while Ruth hummed hymns of thanksgiving. "Look there," Sarah called out as they approached the final ridge overlooking their valley. The sight below made them all pause in wonder. Children darted across the meadow like bright butterflies, their excited shouts carrying on the wind. Behind them, a crowd of neighbors gathered near Micah's cabin, waving and calling out welcome. Word of their victory had somehow outpaced their return journey. Jonas guided the horses down the familiar trail, his expression softening as he watched Anna brush happy tears from her cheeks. As soon as the wagon rolled to a stop, they found themselves surrounded by celebrating friends. "God be praised," Mrs. Peterson called out, embracing each sister in turn. "We knew you'd show that banker what real justice looks like." "The land is yours proper now," Mr. Thompson declared, pumping Jonas's hand. "And these fine ladies are true brides and landholders both." Before they could catch their breath, plans were already forming. "We'll start on that barn first thing tomorrow," declared old Bill Mason, his weathered face creased with determination. "Got my sons bringing timber at dawn." "And we'll all pitch in," added another neighbor. "Show those who'd burn us out that we build stronger together." As afternoon mellowed into evening, the celebration moved inside Micah's cabin. Lanterns cast a warm glow as dishes appeared from every direction. Fresh bread, preserved fruits, roasted venison, and even Mrs. Peterson's famous apple pie. The table groaned under the bounty of Thanksgiving their neighbors provided. Joy filled every corner where fear had lately dwelt. Ruth's color was high as she helped serve, her strength visibly returning. Sarah and Micah worked together arranging plates, their movements already comfortable and coordinated. Leah's laughter mingled with the children's as she taught them a clapping game by the hearth. In a quiet moment, Jonas found Anna near the window. The lamplight caught the gold in her hair as she turned to him. "I owe you thanks," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just for saving our land with that document." "What else?" she asked. "You saved something more precious." He looked out at their gathered community, then back to her face. "My faith." I'd started to doubt God's providence, living so long with just survival and solitude. But He sent you, all of you, to remind me that His plans are bigger than our understanding. Anna's smile was gentle. "Then we're both grateful, because He sent us exactly where we needed to be." A week after their triumph at the courthouse, the rebuilt barn glowed with lantern light and love. Fresh-cut pine garlands draped the newly raised beams, their sweet scent mingling with wildflowers gathered by neighbor children. Preacher Hale stood before the gathered community, his Bible open as 4 couples approached. Anna and Jonas stepped forward first, their faces solemn with joy. Sarah placed her trembling hand in Elias's steady grip, while Leah's radiant smile matched the sparkle in Micah's eyes. Ruth, her strength now restored, gazed up at Caleb with complete trust, far from the frail girl who had stumbled from the stagecoach weeks ago. The rings were simple bands of silver, but the vows rang true and deep. Ute neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder with settlers, their presence a testament to bridges built and prejudices overcome. Children scattered flower petals along the wooden floor as each couple sealed their promises with kisses. "What God has joined, let no man put asunder," Preacher Hale proclaimed 4 times, his voice growing stronger with each blessing. The barn echoed with applause and happy tears. As fiddles struck up a lively tune, the newlyweds took their first turns around the floor. Jonas held Anna close. Sarah and Elias moved in perfect rhythm. Leah and Micah added playful spins, while Caleb guided Ruth with gentle care. Their laughter joined the music, rising to the rafters of the barn they had built together. Weeks passed like gentle rain after drought, bringing new life to the Colorado Valley. Gardens flourished behind each cabin, rows of corn and beans reaching toward the summer sun. In the meadows, cattle and horses grazed contentedly, their bells chiming across the peaceful landscape. The rebuilt barn stood proud against the mountains, its fresh-cut timber weathering to a rich golden hue. The Whitlock sisters, now settled with their husbands in separate but nearby cabins, kept their promise to stay close. Every evening, paths worn between their homes carried visits and shared meals. Children from neighboring homesteads often gathered in their yards, their laughter echoing through the valley like music. At dusk, Jonas and Anna could be seen on their porch, heads bowed in prayer. Their quiet words of gratitude rose with the evening star, thanking the Lord for mercy shown to their joined families. Near the creek, Caleb walked with Ruth, her strength growing daily as they guided a gangly foal through its first steps. Elias and Sarah worked side by side in their herb garden, his once solitary world now brightened by her gentle presence. Their careful tending of healing plants became a symbol of how love could grow in rocky soil. At the edge of the meadow, Micah and Leah bent their heads together over plans for the autumn harvest, her optimism matching his practical nature perfectly. The valley itself seemed to celebrate their unity. Ute families traded regularly with the settlers, sharing knowledge of the land's rhythms. Together they mended fences, raised buildings, and marked the seasons with shared ceremonies of gratitude. As evening settled over the highlands, lamplight glowed from each cabin window like earthbound stars. These lights stood as beacons of hope fulfilled, proof that four sisters' prayers for unity had been answered beyond measure. In this valley, they had found not just marriages, but a community bound by love stronger than greed, faith deeper than fear, and justice more powerful than violence. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.